So there's that issue of the economic value of our languages. I think people usually say it. There was even someone who said that he established a school in Congo, and then in the school they only teach in the local language. And some parents took their children out of the school because they felt like my child is learning this language, and what are the economic prospects? What is the future like? And the whole reason, I mean, the reason why we are not seeing the economic value is because we don't give value to our languages. Because all those people who are learning the language, some of them don't know what to do next. Like after they've learned a local language, they don't know what to do except to teach. But they don't know that there are other opportunities. For instance,
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the CEAV English Talk. Okay, the creative, educational, altruistic, and vital talk about various topics that are really relevant and we need to discuss. And I thought we need to talk about our indigenous languages here in Africa. So, who are you? Please introduce yourself.
All right. Thank you so much, Eliane, for inviting me on this show. I'm really glad to be able to talk about myself and what I do as well. So my name is Namaran Coulibaly. I am a language professional, and I am really passionate about languages. I am the operations manager for a company called Bolingo. So what Bolingo does is language services, interpretation, translation, localization. And I also host a podcast called Africa's LSP Podcast. And on this podcast, I have conversations with language professionals about the work they do. So let me take this opportunity to talk a bit about the language industry. It is an industry that people don't really know much about. And just to cut it short, the key services are translation and interpretation. And I'm currently based in Accra, in Ghana, which is known as the gateway to Africa. And it's a very beautiful place, and I'm really glad to be here. And yes, so I'll be available to answer any other questions about the work I do, about language services, and about Africa as well.
Great. So, how long have you been involved in this language as a professional in languages, and which languages are you working with?
Okay, so it all started with a program that I undertook in Cameroon. So I did a master's in conference interpreting. It was a 2 years program from 2016 to 2018. And so after that program, I was really drawn to language services, and I felt like this is really the career that I want to do. And so from then, I went on to establish the company I spoke about, Bolingo, and it's been really an exciting journey. In terms of my language combinations, I work into English. So my languages are French and English, and so I work in these languages.
But what's your background in terms of language? Are you an English speaker or you're a French speaker? Because right now, as you're speaking, I'm lost. I don't know whether you're from Ghana. I don't know exactly. So please tell the audience what is your language background?
Okay, it's something I usually have to explain to people because I have an interesting background. So I'm Ivorian and Ghanaian as well, and so my early days when I was younger, I was speaking French, and then I switched to English, and since then English has dominated, and so currently English is more of the language that I am most fluent in. Yes.
Can you please elaborate on that? When you say you have a French background, Ivorian French background, so and when did you switch to the English, full English?
Okay, so like I said, I was in the French-speaking country in Cote d'Ivoire for some years, and then I switched um, about 20 years ago or more to English. And since then, I've been using English in almost everything I do in education and in a lot of spheres. And we know how language is really about usage. So the more you use a language, the more you become fluent. I remember back in the days when I was learning English, I was really taking it serious. I was really, really serious. I was reading all the time because here I was from a French background, and then I'm just inserted in an English speaking environment in an English speaking school where I have to, you know, try to be the same level with other students who have been speaking the language for a long time. So it really took a lot of effort for me, but I think I was determined. And initially in those days, I even remember that was in junior high school. Yes, I did junior high school in Ghana, and there was a time when we had the first exam. I was crying because I didn't know what to write because I didn't understand anything that was being taught, and I couldn't even read what was written on the board because the characters were a bit different or a bit strange to me. So luckily for me, back then in junior high school, we were only four in the school that I was in. It was the first junior high school class, JHS1. And so we're only four. And so the teachers really had time and patience they had time and patience to take me through and really, they also understood my situation. They understood that I was from a French speaking environment and then being inserted in this phase. But I think I did well because about 2 or 3 years later, I was already first in English in my class, and the students were always wondering how come or how is it that this French girl has come and she is being, she's already topping the class in English. And it's because I was intentional about learning English. I knew that I had to put in a lot of effort, and so I really did that.
I see. That's an interesting background, by the way. So, can you say that you are more anglophone than francophone?
Yes, I mean, in terms of culture, I would say I'm more Anglophone because I've really been shaped by the English speaking culture. So yes, I'm more Anglophone than Francophone.
But you can speak French, though. You can still speak
Definitely.
French.
Yes, yes, I do.
And so you do interpretation and translation, English to French, French to English.
No, I only do into English.
Hmm.
Yes, I want to focus on my strength, and so I do into English all the time.
I see. I see. Now we know more about you. We know more about your background. Everything's clear, I think. Anyway, we can go back to it later if it's needed. So, tell us about this endeavor that you are working on with your company.
Bolingo.
Bolingo. It sounds like
Yes.
Lingala, something like that. It's a very, very
Yes.
interesting. It sounds like a Lingala name. So, why Bolingo? Why this company? Why this activity? Tell us.
Mm,
Why this will to be involved into to become a language expert and interpreter and translator? Where does it come from?
mm. So, as you rightly said, Bolingo is a Lingala word. It means love, and so that's the origin of the name of the company. And so, initially, when we started working on the company, I wasn't so passionate about African languages. I was just getting into it, but after some time, I really got to see the gaps that were there and the challenges that a lot of African language professionals were facing. Now, with regards to why language services, I think that it's a very passionate field, and it's a field that is not really very popular. Many people don't really know that you can even make money out of a language, that you can sell and buy languages, and so it's a very interesting field. And especially, what really motivated me was the fact that I realized that in Africa we are providing language services. We are doing translation, we are doing interpretation, we are doing dubbing, and all those services, but it seems as if we are not there on the global stage. For instance, there's a ranking that is done by a company called Nimdzi Insight. It's a ranking of the 100 top language services providers in the world. And the ranking is based on revenue. So the least, let's say the lowest companies in the ranking are those that have $10 million revenue, yearly revenue. And on that list of 100 top LSPs in the world, there's no African company. Like
Wow.
no company based in Africa. Yes, and so it really got us thinking like, So what is really happening? Like, are we just providing the services, or are we not getting engaged? Are we not? Why are we not making so much? And so that has really been like the driving force behind everything that we do at Bolingo. And especially when it comes to African languages, recently we launched an initiative called Akan Kasiebo. And Akan Kasiebo is a news or information platform that is published in the Akan language. So we chose two of the Akan language varieties, which are Asante, Twi, and Fanti. What we realize is that Akan is spoken in Ghana, like it's a very popular language. However, the radio stations that broadcast in the language don't publish in the language. So you would go to these to the website of these radio stations, and you would see that they are publishing news in English. And so it really got us thinking as to, why is it the case? Is it that they feel people won't like to read in the language, or people won't love to interact in the language? And so that has really been the driving force. So we want to make sure that African languages are, used online on the internet, not just spoken, because if we don't use them online, they can't grow. The language grows when we use it. The more we use it, the more we come up with terminology, the more we come up with various ways of saying things, even scientific things. And so that's why it's really important to ensure that our languages are online. And having a news platform in the language is, I think, the most amazing thing that could happen. And already we are seeing people interacting on the platform, and so it's really encouraging.
No, that's very striking because what you mentioned earlier before talking about this website in Asante and Tui. Uh, the thing is, when you mention this ranking of the 100 companies, okay, why Africa is absent in the list? Is it because our languages are not as, impactful, as important? They are not major languages, or because those companies were working with the major languages, English, French, Spanish, are not well structured? Why is it that way? And now the transition to you working on this website promoting a local language from Africa, like Asante. The second question, this is a twofold question, sorry.
Mm,
So the second question, but they are related, if you get
mm,
what I mean. The thing
mm.
is, our local language, we don't have a writing system. I mean, for what we know, there's no writing system. Or if we have a writing system, we are borrowing the one from the West. I mean, European writing system to transcribe our local language. So why is it that way? Why are we absent from the 100
Yeah.
ranking? And how come we don't have a writing system and we need to borrow another writing system to transcribe our own writing? Isn't the reason why our languages are not so popular?
All right. Thank you so much for this question. For the first question of why there is no African company yet in terms of the top 100 companies, we haven't done a research about that. But what I can say is based on observation. First of all, I see that a lot of the demand, even for African languages, is coming from outside the continent. So there is an LSP abroad, let's say in Europe, that receives a request for an African language or another language, and then they send it back to Africa. We do it, and then it goes back. And so whatever revenue that they get, it won't reflect as money from Africa. It's reflecting as the money of that company, obviously. And so it's also because they really respect languages. For instance, you can imagine how the language diversity in Canada, the fact that they are using both French and English, you see how it's playing out. Like it's really playing out well to the extent that they always have to translate everything in these two languages. And so because they give value to the languages, they are always, uh, looking for opportunities to translate. And so that's where the jobs come from. The second observation that I have made is also the fact that many of us on the continent are not reinvesting into our companies. And so someone claims to have a language business, but the whatever money is made from that company is not, put into growing the company, into getting, let's say, employees, into, building initiatives, platforms. So these are the things that can make an industry grow. So we have a lot of people doing language services, but at the end of the day, the revenue that they get is not invested back in the language services industry, is used for other purposes. And so I think what we need are really strong and robust companies, like language services companies, that are really companies that are really intending to invest back whatever they get back into their businesses. And that's what we're doing at Bolingo. And that's why we're able to create initiatives like Akan Kasiebo, like the podcast that we have, like Localization Africa, and so on and so forth. So that's what I can say for that first question. Now, in regards to the second question about African languages, I think that we have writing systems, although of course they are in the Latin script, but a lot of our languages have standard writing systems, and so it's easier to work in them, to translate in them, to localize in them. Recently, even the national budget for Ghana was is into tree, is translated into tree. So you can imagine all this financial terminology being translated. Everything was translated, and so you can see the fact that our languages have that capacity to expand. And so there is no excuse. The fact is that we have the writing systems, we have everything that we need, but we just need to keep using them and making sure that they are all over on the internet as well.
Mm. And okay, let's go deeper about that writing system. What does it look like? Because personally, I don't have a clue about the writing system for our local languages in Africa. In Cote d'Ivoire, we have over 60 local languages, and in Ghana, I think nearly the same,
Yeah,
and
around 50.
around 50. And you have Benin, all those countries. You have at least 20 to 30, 40 languages, local languages. And do you mean that all those languages they have a writing system? If so, how come we are not aware of that? How come it's not taught at school? Because that's the point. This is where all this is
Yeah.
where everything starts. I mean, at school.
Yes. So the interesting thing is that the languages are being taught in some schools, in some countries. Countries have different language policies. And you would find that in some countries, the languages are taught in schools. An example is Ghana. In Ghana, there are 11 local languages that the government is sponsoring. So what it means is that these languages are being taught in schools, and then there's also materials for that. The unfortunate thing, I think the reason why you might really be asking this question is because of Cote d'Ivoire. I know that in Cote d'Ivoire, for instance, the languages are not being taught in schools. And if we think about it, it's really unfortunate. But I heard a conversation going around about the fact that they would very soon start. I don't know. I think they are planning to start teaching these languages in schools. So the languages have writing systems. Of course, many of them have special characters in them that are also taught in the alphabet. So they've been standardized, but the only thing is, being able to use them. In Ghana, for instance, there is an there's a university that teaches that offers a program, a Bachelor of Arts in the local languages, and also even masters in the local languages. And then all these people who come out of this school, they become teachers, and then they play various roles. So in terms of writing systems, it's there. Some countries are more advanced. For instance, for the East African countries, you know how Kiswahili is really, really widespread.
Yeah.
And yes, so some languages have really made progress with regards to the use of the languages, but some
Also,
are still lagging behind.
Yoruba. I think also Yoruba in Nigeria.
Exactly. Igbo and Yoruba too are being taught, they are taught in Nigeria. So the languages are being taught in many places, but somehow the colonial languages are taking over gradually. And we are not really seeing the importance of mother tongue education. Actually, research has shown that children who are taught in their mother tongues actually excel, because you would go to some environments, for instance, the rural areas. These are children who grow in multilingual environments. They are in an environment where maybe, for instance, at home, their father speaks one language, their mother speaks another language, and around they have friends who speak other languages. And so they really grow in that multilingual environment. Now, usually at home, the child speaks a language, a local language of their parents. So when the child now goes to school, it's English.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that. For a young child, it's really disturbing to start learning this concept in another person's language, because the fact is that you are understanding whatever the teacher is saying, but you don't really grasp the concept because it's not your thing. You're teaching a child in nursery about apples in Africa. The child in the rural area has not even seen an apple before, you know. Um, so it's like it's just chewing and pouring, the knowledge. So and now you have something, a phenomenon that has been going on for years, where they tell children don't speak vernacular in the school. All these things, we think that we are doing it because we want the children to learn English. It's good. But I think at some point, some countries do it. Like what they do is that maybe from nursery up till primary, I think primary 3 or 4, the child uses the local language. And then from that level upwards, the child starts using English. I think that approach is really good.
Mm.
But because we are placing too much emphasis on the colonial languages, so fluency in our native languages is dying a bit.
Mm. It's dying. And I have this burning question here. Let me read it because this is the core of our conversation. Why our languages are like fading away. So my question is, most people concerns, as you know, in Africa is about making a living. And in the first place, this is what people want. Okay, if I study in, I mean, if I only speak like Ashanti, Twi, or Fante, or Diula, or Bete, okay, am I gonna make a living with that language? That's a burning question. So, and it seems like our local languages can't help with that. I mean, as far as we know, because this world is like is a global village, as we know, it's a global community. We're talking online today. Like today, we are on Google Meet. So in this online community, the colonial languages are the thing, the things. And if you don't speak those languages, if you are not fluent using those languages, you are like going astray, or you are left behind. This is what we are being taught so far. This is what we think. And so the thing is, why investing and in learning and engaging in our local languages, why is it important for us as Africans? And how can this guarantee our, let's say, financial independence, so to speak? I hope you get my burning question.
Yes, I get your question. And so I believe that everything starts from giving value to our languages, because what you give value to grows actually. Let's take the example of the Chinese and the Japanese. They are so proud of their language. And so they use it, they find ways and means to use it. And if in Africa, if for instance, the colonizers came, or let's say Europeans or others, if they come and then we only speak our language, don't you think that they would find people to interpret the languages, and then it's work
Like,
like
sure,
um,
they will.
so so there's that issue of the economic value of our languages. I think people usually say it. There was even someone who said that he established a school in Congo, and then in the school they only teach in the local language, and some parents took their children out of the school because they felt like my child is learning this language, and what are the economic prospects, what is the future like. And the whole reason, I mean, the reason why we are not seeing the economic value is because we don't give value to our languages. Because all those people who are learning the language, some of them don't know what to do next. Like after they've learned a local language, they don't know what to do except to teach. But they don't know that there are other opportunities. For instance, we in our company we are currently doing localization for a big tech company. And uh, of course, it's a huge project, and the translators working on it are really, really earning a lot. And
Oh, what? Sorry, what do you mean
yes,
localization? I mean, you mean translating everything in the local language for the company?
exactly.
Wow.
Yes, when I say so translation is like the document, but it's at a smaller level. When if you have to, let's say, turn a platform like TikTok into a local language, an African local language, if you have to translate, then it becomes localization, because you're not only focusing on the words, you're also focusing on the cultural elements. You're focusing on some issues like currency, colors. So there's a whole lot. That's why we say localization. So it's the same translation, but because it's a wider scope.
It involves
So we
the
say
cultural, the identity, cultural
exactly.
aspects of it.
Exactly. And of course, there's the technical side of it, putting the platform together, making sure that the strings are okay. It's really technical. So it's called localization because it really encompasses a whole lot. So let's say, for instance, that in Africa, we've reached a stage where we have about 2,000 languages, right? We've reached a state where each country is using their language, like every every ethnic group is using its language. Don't you think that a social media company would want to localize in that language to have access to these people?
But okay, to have access to these people, for what purpose? Because
For them to use the platform, because the platforms that they are creating is they are using the platforms to market for marketing purposes, right?
what are we
If someone,
gaining? I mean, we using our own language. What are we gaining in return? I mean, financially speaking, are we?
uh,
Because I get what you mean. Okay,
yeah,
they are gonna use our they are gonna do localization using our local languages. Okay,
mm,
Malenke, Jula, Bete, Guo, Asante. Okay, but how are we going to benefit from that on a financial level? That's it. How are we benefiting from it? I want to know. You are the expert. Please
yeah,
tell us. We want to
yeah.
know.
So the aspect I'm giving is the aspect of people working in the language industry. So there will be more need for language services, because they would want you to localize into the language because they want to have access to the people who speak the language.
So this will
And
create
now,
more job opportunities.
exactly. And multilingualism itself creates opportunities. It's not only in the colonial languages, multilingualism in every form creates opportunities. And so you would have, for instance, what we did with the Akan Kasibo, where we have a news platform for Asante Tree and Fanti, which are spoken in Ghana. It's a job that we've given to people who use that language.
Hmm.
The writers on the platform are people who have studied, the language, and so it's economic value. These are some of the ways that we are creating the economic value. You understand? So the thing is, there are so many opportunities, but because we don't really think about it, we feel like it's just a language. It's not important.
Hmm.
You see that, for instance, the other countries come to our continent and they establish language and culture centers.
Mm-hmm.
We know of the Alliance Française, we know of
American
the
corners, stuff like that. Hmm.
yeah, so I mean these people really understand the importance of language. And so they set up these cultural centers so that they can maintain their language. But we've never thought about it that what about our local languages? Can we also set up cultural centers abroad? Can we set up cultural centers like all over the globe to promote our languages? The beautiful thing about us as Africans is that we already grow in that multilingual environment, and so it's somehow easier for us to even learn other languages.
Yeah.
You would see that most Americans you meet only speak English.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, so sometimes they get amazed when they see people speaking other languages. In Africa, you can find one person speaking about 10 local languages
Yep.
fluently.
Yep. Yep.
So we have that advantage. And knowing a language is an advantage. Knowing English is an advantage. And knowing your local language is also an advantage. So let's reflect over it and let's not put our languages aside.
Hmm. So, what can we do about it, or what have you already started doing about it at Bolingo?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, what we've started doing is with the Akan Kasiebo news platform. And I mentioned that Akan, for instance, is a language that is spoken widely in Ghana, but it's not written. You wouldn't find a newspaper in the Akan language. You wouldn't find a written content news in the Akan language on the internet. So we created that first platform in the local language on the internet to promote the language.
But
What we are also
do we
doing,
have newspapers in Accra, in Akan, in
no,
I mean
we don't
not
have
paper,
newspapers in any,
paper newspaper?
no,
Oh,
no, no. No, but in the East African countries, they have for Kiswahili, they have newspapers because the language is like is so wide, it's so spoken. So even that newspaper, you're giving job to those who are able to write and are fluent in the language. So it's economic value.
mm,
So like I said, the more we use, the more we find uses for our language, the more we speak and write our language, the more we are creating employment everywhere.
mm,
Even for instance, if there's a YouTube video in a native language. Usually, sometimes we have this request where people want to, some companies or an individual wants to know what is being said in a video.
mm-hmm,
And that video can be given to anyone. You don't have to be a language professional. You just need to understand the language and then you transcribe.
mm-hmm.
So the more, if you don't use your native language on YouTube, then, I mean, if you use another language, no one will come and tell you to transcribe because they understand already. But if you use your native language, then there is that aspect of transcription. Like, so it's so wide. Like, the more you use it, like, the opportunities are limitless.
If you use your language and you have something valuable, because that's the key. So
Mm,
what do we have that is valuable that we have to offer, and we need to, like, okay, to say, okay, we are Africans, we have our local language, this is valuable stuff, let's talk about it in our local languages. Can you give me some examples?
mm. Okay, the first thing I want to say is that when you speak to someone in their native language, like, you get straight to their heart. So based on your target audience, maybe you have a message that you want to share with a particular ethnic group or your own ethnic group. Of course, it's better to use your language, based on your audience. And sometimes you see that the Chinese and these other people are able to keep some of their secrets, whatever secret it is, among themselves because it's in their language.
Eh,
You can't know everything. And what is even interesting about our local languages is that even if you use Google Translate, now we have some of our languages on Google Translate
mm,
because it's not very advanced. So you won't even, like, you will understand bits and pieces, but the deeper meaning will be lost because you know how our languages are we have proverbs, we have all kinds of interesting things in
so
them.
deep.
They are really deep. And so, you can keep some things, it's not everything that you want to tell the whole world. There are some things that you might want to retain, So it's really that's amazing. Like that's way of thinking that will help us to make progress. Yeah.
Hmm. Tell us a bit about your achievement, what you've been able to accomplish so far in terms of impacting uh, the co- the African community. I mean, in Ghana and beyond Ghana, about the importance of um, learning, increasing the value of our local languages. What have you been able to do so far? I mean, this website in Ashanti, is it Ashanti? If am I pronouncing?
Um, the website is in Akan. So Akan, we just chose two varieties. Yes.
Okay, so this website in Akan, this is your, let's say, your greatest achievement so far. Before that, what have you been able to do? What were the little steps before that major
Mm,
one?
okay. Thank you very much. I think the first major achievement that we did was to produce a podcast for the language services in Africa because there is nothing like that. Like there is no podcast that talks about language services in Africa. I mean, prior to us having that podcast, so it's called Africa's LSP podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And we started in 2021, and we're having conversations with language professionals, translators, interpreters, trying to find out more about African languages and the work that they do. So I think that really is one of our key achievements. And then also in terms of engagement, I would say that engagement has been really key. On a personal level, I've also had some recognition. For instance, I was ranked among the Nimzi localization influencers. That was last year, and then
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, so to be ranked among localization influencers globally, like it's really a good starting point. And then I was
Not
also ranked
nationally,
among
but globally.
globally. Yes, it's a global ranking. It's a global ranking. So That is one, and it's really linked to that objective of making sure that Africa is on the map, on the global map when it comes to language services.
Mm.
Another thing I'm very proud of is the fact that I was also named among the 52 women driving the language industry, and that is also on that global ranking.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think in terms of engagement, we are trying to create that sphere where we can interact, we can, have conversations, we can grow the industry
Mm.
and also support those who are, working in it, especially the local language translators, because some of them, because they don't have work often, so they have to do other things, and it doesn't really, it has an impact on the quality of what they can produce. So we're really trying to create that engagement.
Mm.
And we've also done localization guides for African countries where we talk about the language and culture of African countries. We've done some for a few countries like um, Ghana, for instance, Tanzania, Senegal, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, and so on and so forth. So um, some of the things that we're trying to do are really focused on the language services industry in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really proud, and also to mention that I really have a formidable team that supports all that we do. I'm not the only person. I'm just kind of a spokesperson, and so
So tell us about
um,
your team then. How many
yeah.
people
So
are in your team?
yeah. So at Bolingo, we work with freelancers all over the world. So they're also part of our team. We have about 70 freelancers that we work with globally,
70?
and
70. 70.
70.
Wow.
Yeah, 70 that we have in our database. And so they are really doing a formidable work in helping us to improve. We have a business development manager, we have a project manager, we have a web development manager, and then we have project assistants that help with various projects.
Hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Very a very strong and valuable team. Indeed.
Yes.
So, really, really, congratulations for all these achievements. We are very proud of you. Reason why we wanted, we knew there was something, behind all this. It's not just a
Yeah.
website about Akan language. There's something deeper.
Yeah.
Reason why we wanted to shine the spotlight on it, to contribute
Thank you.
more to, to make it, to raise the awareness of what you've been able to achieved so far. And this is,
Yeah.
let's say, this is just the beginning, because we have a long way to go in terms of raising the value of our local languages. And this, let's let's go back to what you mentioned earlier, the difference between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire in terms of the influence of local languages, because it's like, they're very opposite countries. They are neighboring countries, but very
Yeah.
opposite in terms of valuing our local languages. So this is another burning question. We won't go into those political stuff,
Yeah.
but why is it like that? Why our local languages in Cote d'Ivoire are not as valued as those in Ghana, though Ghana is the country nearby?
I was hoping that you'll be able to give us an answer because you are, you know, I've been out of sync, for some time, and you are there. So I was hoping that you give us some answer.
I mean, I can't I can't give an answer. Oh, you really want me to say something about it? Okay, let me try. Okay, why is it like that? For sure, French is very powerful. The French language is very strong, very powerful in our culture. And let's take my personal experience. Okay,
Mhm.
it's sad, but I don't speak my mother tongue, my local language. I don't speak it. I know when
And
I
and
was
what's the name? What's the name of your local language?
Bon. It's in the western part of Cote d'Ivoire. They call it also Gagou, but the real name is Ban. They are not far from Gouro, Bete, in central west of Cote d'Ivoire. Ume City. Okay, so I don't speak that. Okay, and those, the people of my generation. Okay, most of us, we don't really speak, and those who were born and raised in Abidjan in the south, okay, in the city,
Mm.
we don't speak our mother tongues, because it's like it was something like, I won't say forbidden, but you don't feel like speaking because your parents don't speak the language with you at home. Okay, you don't speak
Yeah.
it. All you know is French from TV to the streets to your friends. From kindergarten to university, all you know is French, and we have this variety. We have this French tonality that you know here. This particular
Mm,
French that is called Nushi, or
mm,
the Iranian French. This is what we know. And in this Nushi is a kind of mixture of our local language that we don't, that most of us don't even speak for real. But we manage to speak it through the Nushi language. But why we don't speak, from my own, from my personal experiences, because my parents won't speak the language with me at home because it all starts from home. And if you don't use it, you lose it. And at school, people speak French, okay? Because your mates also, the language is not spoken at home with their parents. So all of you, in the schoolyard, you speak French. And people used to say it's because we have a variety of local languages. There is Senufo, there is Bete, more than 60 local languages. So how can we select some and speak? Because there is no official one. We can say Baule, we can say it's Jula. So it's difficult to teach something, and we can have our kids learn the 60 languages. Is impossible. So, okay, let's cut it short. Focus on French. Okay. If you are able to speak your local language, you're lucky. If you're not, don't bother. Anyway, you'll make it in life because there's no point of really being involved. So, this is my own explanation from my own experience. But when I'm listening to you, I see that this economic drive is, we can be, let's say, improved with our local language. And when we see Ghana in terms of like economic power, I mean, Ghana is ahead of Cote d'Ivoire. When you
mm.
see Kenya, where we have Kiswahili, all those countries, they are very far from Cote d'Ivoire. Why? And when we go deeper, when we dig deeper, we see because they value their local languages, and this is they've realized that this is a wealth, and they need to nurture it, and they need to flourish it. But here, it's not the same at all. And this is what I can say about Cote d'Ivoire. But you are also from Cote d'Ivoire, so
Yes. So I think there's the reason why it's not we don't teach those languages in schools because there's no one has really taken it upon themselves to see it as a problem.
yeah,
You know how advocacy starts. Initially in the US, women were not voting and all that, but there was advocacy. People stood up and said, "We want women have to vote. We need equal rights." And so it will start from advocacy. I don't know whether it's going to be from the people themselves or NGOs or companies that provide language services. If for instance all those who provide language services in Cote d'Ivoire rise up and then they have some kind of petition or something, create advocacy, it will definitely change the situation. But most of them, of course, are providing services in the colonial language, so that they are not really
yeah,
concerned.
no. even
Exactly.
even this is what I do. I'm an English coach. I'm coaching people to
Yes.
speak English, and I
Yes.
don't see the point of coaching people in speaking my local language, which I don't know, by the way. So,
Mm.
so I'm
Yes.
focusing on coaching people speaking
Mm.
English. So that's
Yes.
it. It's sad, but advocacy is the key. But where and how will this start? We don't
Yeah.
really know.
And from what you said about the languages are so many and where do we start? One thing that some countries did in the beginning or some years ago was that they teach the language based on the region where people are based.
Hmm.
So if you are based in a particular region, I mean your community, whatever language is spoken in that district is what is taught. And that is amazing. That is fantastic. So you would see that all languages should be taught.
So what
you know.
language are we going to teach in Abidjan then? Because Abidjan is a,
Uh,
is a capital
and
city.
now And now, in the example of Ghana, they selected some of the most popular languages. So, of course, there will be a ranking of the number of speakers. So maybe this language has 100,000 speakers and all that. So, based on that, now you select some of them, about 5, 10, or 11. I'm not sure anyone will rise up and say, "No, why are you not teaching my language in schools?" No, and so that is also a way to do it. So doing a ranking and saying, okay, let's choose the maybe the 10 most spoken local languages and let's teach them in schools. And then you give the children the opportunity to choose. So, for instance, in Ghana, in most schools, in Accra, for instance, you have the option to choose among three. So there is Ga, there is Ewe, and then there is also Akan.
Hmm.
Even the Akan, there are three language varieties that you can choose on this. That you can choose from. Even with Akan, there are three varieties that you can choose from. There's Equiapim tree, there is Fanti, and then there is Asante tree. So three varieties for the same language. So you see how really the language has expanded. People have that understanding. So and sometimes we say that, oh, let's speak one language, otherwise we won't be united. But I don't think it's true. There is beauty in diversity. You can still speak your different languages, but still be united. And I don't think language has ever been a cause of conflicts in Africa. No, conflicts are caused by other issues. Maybe they are fighting over land, they are fighting over some other things, but it's not because
They
you
don't
speak a
understand
different
each
language.
other.
It's not because of that. And we can and we have, like I said, people are able to speak 10 native languages, even though it's not theirs. And so even me, my native language is Senegal, for instance, but unfortunately I don't speak it. But it doesn't mean that I have to be discouraged. What I've done is to adopt I've adopted Asante tree.
Okay, so you can speak
Um,
it very well.
I can speak, and do you know why I can speak it? It's because I was taught in school. I was taught the language when I was in junior high school.
Wow.
You understand? And the teacher will come to class and he will speak in the language. I remember back then, I used to ask him to speak English because I wasn't hearing what he was saying. He would come to the class and just be rattling in the language. I'm like, oh my God,
It's for that providing comprehensible inputs in that can, so you need to get used to
Yes.
it.
And when he comes, he's teaching a tree and he's teaching the tree with a tree. He's not teaching it with English. And so if you don't understand, it's up to you. I mean, back then I was really frustrated, but looking back now, I realized that it was really a wonderful practice, and I'm really glad I had the opportunity to learn because now I can read Asante tree and I can speak it. I'm not very fluent, but at least I can read it and I can speak it. And that is amazing. It's an African language, and I'm proud at least to know an African language. And so this is just an example of what it takes.
You
Yeah.
see. Wow. This is very, very brilliant. So now what's the next step with now that you have this first website? Are we gonna see other websites in other local languages? So what's the next step after this website in Akan?
Yes. So definitely, what we want to do is to have a multilingual platform in many African languages. So that is
In
the next step.
2,000 languages?
Yeah. If Why not? Why not? It's possible. And so yes, we are reflecting over it and planning and making sure that at least we are able to map out all the languages and be able to also reach out to the professionals of that language because there are many people who are very fluent in the languages who are already language professionals and so want to work with some of these people. Yeah.
So we don't have this. Don't have this in Africa yet. I mean, a platform where we see all the over 2,000 languages in Africa. We don't have such
No,
thing yet in Africa.
no,
Wow.
no.
So if you are a kind of pioneer in that field, that will be like, oh wow.
Yes. And even when we say we have over 2,000 languages, it's a bit less because some of the languages have varieties.
Yes, like you said,
So
for
like
Akan,
exactly. For Akan, you have like I think about a lot of varieties, about five or something. So
maybe 3,000,
sometimes
maybe around 4,000 languages.
no, no. What I mean is that okay, right now we are saying 2,000, but I'm just saying that even with the 2,000, we are mentioning. we are mentioning, we are adding the varieties to it. So if we
Okay.
combine it, yes, if we combine it, it will be less actually.
Oh, I see. I see.
When we say Akan, for instance, Akan itself is more of a tribe, But the languages are what we have, the Fanti, Asante tree and all that.
And
The
we have a
Akan is more.
variety of Akan in Cote d'Ivoire, like Baoulé,
Exactly. You
Aini,
have the Nzima,
Nzima. Yes.
so on and so forth. Yes. So Akan is more of the large identity, yeah.
I see. So, well, I think we are almost at the end of our
Yeah.
conversation. So, tell us, this conversation is, we talked about the creative side, with what you did with Bolingo and this website, very creative. Really congratulate you for that. And also educational, because it's all about education. And also altruistic, because you are thinking of Africa as a whole. Okay, your
Mm.
concern is how we can value our language. So it's really altruistic, and we are really grateful for what you are doing. So finally, why is it vital for Africans to value their individual indigenous language, their local languages, their indigenous languages? Why is it vital? The V of CAV.
Yes. If I can sum it up in one word, I would say identity. Language is our identity. Language is who we are. And in Africa, we see it, so much. For instance, sometimes when you meet someone for the first time, what are some of the questions that they will ask you, according to you, Eliane? If you meet someone in Africa for the first time and they want to get to know you, what would they ask you?
uh, where are you from? I mean, what language do you speak? Stuff like that.
Exactly. And sometimes, even when you mention your name, they already know where you're from. They already know your language. So that identity is so deep. Like language is really that identity that we have. And
It's
you can
not that,
imagine
sorry, they are not asking to discriminate, but to know and to connect with you more.
exactly. So you can imagine, for instance, you've gone to your hometown and people are talking about you in your native language. How would you feel?
Oh, I'll be
Like,
like,
I think that's the worst feeling ever. Like it's your native language. You're supposed to know it, but you don't know it.
you don't know
And
it.
people are talking about you or in that language. And you're there like just staring.
You are deaf.
And you know how in the villages, you know how they behave when you come there and you can't speak. Like some of them really are like, they act surprised and they laugh and you're like, oh, they find it really interesting that you can't speak the language.
You are
And so
an
yeah.
extraterrestrial.
And also one point that I want to add is also that we shouldn't consider people who don't speak the colonial language as illiterate. No, that is not a definition of illiterate. Illiteracy means someone who can't read or write in a language. So someone who can read or write in their own language, they are not illiterate. And so let's really have that understanding also that anyone who doesn't speak the colonial language, either English or French, is not an illiterate. Some of them have amazing ideas. They have like some things they want to share, but because of the language barrier, they are not able to share them. And some of them are really very smart, intelligent, but because we think we kind of link intelligence to a language. So we feel like, oh, this person is not intelligent because they don't speak this language. And even sometimes we laugh at people who are not fluent in English or French, which is really not the best because I think we have to try and appreciate our languages.
Yes,
Yeah.
we really need to. Thank you so much. So where can we find you? We will put the link, every link in the description of the video. But where can we find the podcast? When can we find Bolingo? Tell us.
Yes. So just go to bolingoconsult.com. You have all the links about our podcast, and then you can also go to localizationafrica.com. And myself, you can find me on LinkedIn, Adi Namaran, ADY, and Namaran, Namaran. So, yes, feel free to reach out to me for a chat, for a conversation. And also, I wish to congratulate you, Eliane, for the effort that you're putting in with the initiative that you're doing. I saw it and I was like, wow, I think was it 20 days of activism? How many days was it?
20 days. 20 days. The
20,
challenge.
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So, and I was like, really, like, it really takes a lot of work, but you're being consistent about it and you're really striving so hard. And so I appreciate it. I think there are many youths in francophone countries who really want to learn English. Like English is really like now the language of opportunities, the global language.
Yeah.
And so when you are able to speak it, it's easier. For instance, I've seen that for most job offers, even in the English speaking countries, they say English and French, So already we have an advantage of speaking French. So when you add English to it, nobody can stop you. And the truth is that for English people, learning French is much more difficult. And so you agree with me?
Yeah. They struggle.
Uh, yes, the struggle. So speaking French and adding English to it is really that advantage that one needs. So I really congratulate you, and
Thank you.
I I invite anyone who is listening to follow you as well to learn to have more insight on English.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. By the way, you are my English expert. Why do you think I need to improve my English? Because I'm still learning. I'm telling.
I mean, you have an American accent. I don't have one. It's really smooth. I mean, it's really nice to listen to. So that's good. I think your English is perfect. I don't see anything for.
Oh,
I don't have anything to share.
well, I
It's really
bow
great.
before you. I know I still I need to improve. I know. I know you are saying it from a
Really?
good heart, but I need to because language is language is a journey. It's a life
Yeah.
journey. So I keep learning, and I hope I'll be learning with you, and I hope that we can have a deeper collaboration with Bolingo and CAV
Yeah.
English.
Thank you so much for inviting me on this conversation as
You're
well.
welcome. So let's talk next time because this is just the beginning, and I am sure we will have more to talk about here. So be blessed, and my regards to your family and friends, and good luck for the future
Thank you.
of bowling.
Thank you so much.
Bye,
Thank you.
Eddie. Thank
Bye.